Alright, everybody looks for a smoking gun. This is the smoker for me. Is this thing here, you see this from here to here? That is 45 miles wide. That our Grand Canyon is only 18 miles wide tops. And this is like 3 miles deep, something like that. It's just unbelievable. So all of that stuff ran out, and you saw that. Now listen to what Plato says about mining and so forth. He says, in the first place, they dug out of the earth whatever was to be found there, mineral as well as metal. And that which is now only a name, and was then something more than a name, oraculum, which is the one I was talking about. Now, that was dug out of the earth in many parts of the island, and with the exception of gold, was esteemed with the most precious of metals among the men of those days. So they were digging like crazy under here. That's why it collapsed. They had an earthquake, and this was on the rim of the going in, and it was in the ocean part. And this, and the rest of my video, well, I'm going to have to make it into 2 videos. The second video is going to show the actual physical evidence from the air and the bridge and the cut coming. There's a bridge in here. There's a bridge going across, and there's a cut going right in there. There's a stadium in there. There's, I mean, it's everything is there. It's exactly what Plato says, identical. The measurements and all that business. The stadium's 606 feet wide, and that's a stadia. Anyway. Let's see what else we got. Okay, here's Plato again. He said that after Atlantis sunk, it says, and afterwards, sunk by an earthquake, became an impassable barrier of mud to voyagers sailing from hence to the ocean. Which would mean from that side out to the ocean now had become a bunch of mud. And the Sahara was drying out, obviously. Listen to this now. Here's the smoker. There has never been any sediment of the earth flowing down from the mountains as in other places which is worth even speaking of. I mean, that says it right there. Alright, it doesn't take a genius to see that that thing dropped into the ground. That was not a volcano and none of this stuff. And Plato says it was clearly an earthquake and it dropped. It's very, very specific. Nothing about a volcano. And up in the Santorini and Crete and all that, but these are all volcanoes. So that obviously is not working for them. Works exactly for here. Alright, as I spoke, Plato is very taken with the amount of dirt that moved. And this is 3.92 miles in this distance here. Now, I'm going to back out of here. Here's the eye of the Sahara. I just measured over there. Now, this is 30 miles across here. Well, let's come out of the plane of this. Alright, so let's take it's over here and over here somewhere. Let's take over here. We'll go over to here. And that is 22, 23 miles, right about in that area. Now, and that's about what Plato said, somewhere in that area. I'm not exactly certain, but it's pretty close. And he said it was 9,000 meters, or, yeah, I believe it was 9,000 meters from in the outside rings. But I'm not going to bore you with all the details, but I can show it later. But now, his main thing was the amount of dirt that flowed out of here. He said never in the whole history of humanity ever will there ever be this amount of dirt that flows. And he's right, because watch this. This drained the whole Sahara. And the Sahara was an ocean. And not only that, look where it put it. It dropped it right out here. It drained right out of there and built up all Cape Verde and all that stuff. It's pretty apparent. It's pretty, I mean, it's just obvious. Now, and that was Atlantis. And Atlantis dropped into the ocean. When it did, it cracked. And right up here, there's a couple of pillars of whatever they were straits for sure. And this was out here on the other side of the bowl of the Sahara, which is here. And all of this debris was pushed out and formed this area here. All right, now, if you go deep into this, you can see, I mean, I have structures, and they'll come up in the next video that'll show there's stadia in there, which are 606 feet wide, and I have them measured in there, and they're exactly correct. There's a bridge over this, and there's a cut going in, and I could probably find it quickly. It's just apparent, but anyway, I'm not going to bore you with the details. The rest of the video is coming up, or I might make it in part 2, because what I want to do you right now is show you what, I mean, you already see what's going on here. Now, you know what would happen. There's going to be some boats or something out in the ocean. They're going to end up going who knows where, because they went everywhere around the world. But the concentration of them, I believe, was in South America, right on these same plains, on the same latitude, longitude, whatever this thing is, around the Earth. The South America, this, and then the rest of them went over, and they came out of the mud into Ethiopia, they say. The Ethiopians say that in their history. Out of the mud. And the history of this whole area is that it was an ocean. They say 20,000 years ago. This whole area was an ocean. And then 5,000 years ago, it turned into grasslands, and now it's desert. Well, it's desert because it drained out of here and formed these islands, and it just drained out of there. And this was Atlantis. It fits exactly Atlantis. And the reason it dropped, Plato says it, and all the things that Plato say are being ignored by the people that come up with Santorini and Crete and Minoan, this and that. Well, this is supposed to be 11,400 years ago. Crete and all those things happened 3,000, 4,000, 5,000 tops. This was 11,400 years ago. Now, the only thing I can't explain is outside the Pillars of Hercules, and I don't even know if that's accurate. They said outside of the pillars. Or outside the straits, or whatever. I'm going to ignore that, because they ignore a lot of things, so I'm going to ignore that. Now, outside of that, nothing does not fit. The Egyptians say that they hooked up with the Ethiopians. The Ethiopians say the same thing. Strangers arrived from the west in the mud, and Plato says exactly this. And they arrived here, and they got friendly with these guys. These guys saved them, helped them. They became buddies together, and I believe these were long-headed people that came over here, and these people were not long-headed people. Now, and they were sort of like in awe of these sophisticates, which they say they came out of the mud sophisticated and polished in every way. Now, they intermingled with them, they helped them, and these people were good, I guess. The Atlanteans, they were reasonable, I guess. They didn't come in and slaughter them. They apparently got along. And then eventually they helped them out up in Egypt. They went up to Egypt around 5,000 BC. So here we go, 11,400, bada boom, she drops. They somehow come out of the mud over here in Ethiopia, let's say, somewhere in that area. Eventually they go up into Egypt, because they must have just decided to move along. So they get up into Egypt. They take over Egypt, and of course there's a bunch of primitives up there, probably. This is all my ideas. It could be totally wrong, but I think that's, to me, it makes sense. Anyway, they go up into here, they take over, they tell them to build a bunch of pyramids, do this and that, and they did it. And then after a few thousand years, they decided these are just big-headed people telling us what to do, and they got upset. And then these guys went offshore into the islands up in here somewhere, and took up residence up there, and had some very nice looking stuff up there, but it was nothing like Atlantis. Atlantis had, all the rings were made out of metal. They were brass and tin and another metal that's all the fine metals of the earth. They had all kinds of sophisticated stuff, and I'm gonna give you the other things. So anyway, the time is right. The mud is exactly right, and it's just that I can't find any other place on earth that could possibly do this kind of a thing. The drying out of the Sahara, and it was grasslands 5,000 years ago. Everything fits. The people, and I believe there was two races of people, and the Atlanteans were one of them, and so forth. And it just all fits together. So that's my take on it, and if anybody has a different view of it, I'd like to hear it. But I have more evidence that I'm going to present to you that are the words of Plato. These aren't my words. I'm just telling you what Plato said, and I'm looking for them, and they're there. That's all I can tell you. All right, what about the geology of this eye? Now, they sent some expert over here, and he says that it's a dome coming up from the bottom of the earth, and that these rings have crushed stone in them, and that the reason the crushed stone is there is that the earth is pushing up these igneous rocks and these crystals that only come from deep earth. Well, Plato says that they were mining everything there was under here, and they used it all to make these walls, which is exactly what he sees. And the guy that did the geological work here said it was something that was hard to explain, but this is how he explained it. Okay, what's up with these crazy looking colors over these rings? Well, metals, which Plato says they had brass around the outside one, they had tin around the next one, and the last one they had this ocholorum, or it's I'm not sure that's how you pronounce it, but it's the metal, very exotic metal they claim. Now, metals leach colors. You've seen copper, it turns green, and you see all these things. So, I mean, there's nothing here hidden. What's the colors doing there? They say, oh, there must be magnetite in the ground. Well, that's a good explanation, but I'm not buying it. All right, now, this is about Atlantis, and I am saying that there was two races of people on the earth at one particular time, and one of them was the Atlanteans, who ended up being the Egyptians, and also down in South America. You think about it, if Atlantis was in the middle of the ocean or somewhere in between, they would escape in both directions, which is exactly what did happen. And look at the size of these heads. I mean, look at this guy. It's like walking around with a watermelon on your head. Now think about, you think about these guys with sort of googly headed, sort of shrouded people underneath, ethereal looking, but I don't think so. I think this guy's going to be pimple shouldered. Just think of how strong his shoulders would have to be to support that. Now, this is where in Africa they still have these people that have these elongated heads. They're not as quite as pronounced, but they think they're good to have, and apparently they were at one time. So these are the kind of things that are still even happening. But my point is that if Atlantis is where I think it was, and that's the eye of the Sahara, they would have escaped to the left and to the right, I would think, mostly. And that would be over into Ethiopia, which is exactly what the Ethiopians say, and then over into South America, which is quite evident that the long-headed people came there as well. So that's where we're starting from. I'm saying they're the Atlanteans, and the rest of them were primitives. And they came over, and as they populated these areas in Egypt and over in South America, they became sophisticated gods over these primitives, and that's what accounts for that kind of subservience and the things that you see, sacrifices and all these crazy rituals and things. Now, were they legitimate and real? Should these gods be gods, and should they do these things? I don't know. I have mixed emotions on that. So anyway, let's talk about what the physical evidence is. All right, in part two, I'm going to show you the actual physical evidence, and it'll be a recap of this and the physical evidence. But now, I want you also to go to mudfossils.com, all one word, mudfossils.com. And I have giants there, where there is giants, and they're absolutely proven. There's DNA tests, and there's 3 DNA tests, 7 CAT scans, no question. And they were found with normal-sized human beings, and there is DNA, and that can be tested. It can be absolutely carbon dated. This stuff is fresh. There's virtual blood. So this should be looked at, and it's refused. Yale, Harvard, all of them, Johns Hopkins, Professor Steven Salzberg refuses, and that's his job, and he claims it's not worth looking at, or he just doesn't have time or something, it's just crazy. They have to take a look at this. So go to mudfossils.com, take a look at it. He was my professor, and he refuses to take a look at it. All right? Thanks.